What is it about the Midwest that makes the darkness feel so heavy? Maybe it's the flatness, the way the land just stretches out forever in every direction and you can see for miles, but somehow, you still feel like something is right behind you. Like all that open space is just an illusion, and whatever's out there in the dark knows exactly where you are. Tonight, I have 4 stories pulled straight from Reddit. 4 people who were just driving, just trying to get from one place to another, and ended up experiencing something they will never, ever forget. Get comfortable. Turn the lights on if you need to. Let's get into it. Story 1. The Truck on I-80. This story was posted by a user who goes by the name Holloway Drives. He's a long-haul trucker, has been doing it for about 11 years. He says in all that time he's seen weird things on the road. Animals, accidents, strange people at rest stops, but nothing prepared him for what happened on a stretch of I-80 in Nebraska around 2 in the morning on a Tuesday in late October. He was heading west, hauling refrigerated goods. The road was dead. Not a single car in either direction for what felt like an hour. The sky was overcast, so there were no stars, no moon, just his headlights cutting through the black and the white dashes of the lane markers, ticking by like a metronome. He said the first thing he noticed was a car pulled over on the shoulder about a quarter-mile ahead. No hazard lights, no headlights, just sitting there in the dark. As he got closer, he could see it was an older sedan, tan or maybe light gray, it was hard to tell. The driver's door was wide open. He slowed down a little as he passed it. He looked over. There was nobody in the car. No one standing near it, no one on the road, just the door hanging open like whoever had been driving it had just vanished mid-trip. He thought about pulling over and calling it in, but he was already behind schedule. He radioed it to dispatch and kept moving. About 20 miles later, he caught something in his mirrors. Headlights. Now, that in itself is nothing. It's a highway. But these headlights were behaving strangely. They were close, way closer than they should have been for how fast he was going. And they weren't passing him. They were just sitting right on his tail, maybe 50 feet off his back bumper, matching his speed exactly. He sped up, 75, 80, 85 miles per hour, which is faster than he ever should be driving an 18-wheeler loaded with freight. The headlights kept pace. He said the thing that started to really mess with his head was the headlights themselves. They were set too wide apart, like the spacing didn't match any car he could identify, and they were sitting low, lower than a standard vehicle, almost like whatever was behind him was crouching. He got on the CB radio and reached out to any other drivers in the area. Static. Tried a cell phone. No signal. For the next 40 minutes, those headlights stayed on him. He passed an exit for a small town and thought about pulling off, but the idea of slowing down on an empty off-ramp in the pitch dark with that thing right behind him felt worse than just staying on the highway. Then, somewhere around mile marker 189, the headlights just dropped back. He watched them in his mirror, getting smaller and smaller until they disappeared completely. He didn't stop until he hit a truck stop in Ogallala. He got out of his cab with shaking hands and walked around to the back of the trailer. He doesn't know what he was expecting to find. Claw marks maybe, a handprint, something. The back of the trailer was fine, but on the rear bumper of the cab, there were 4 long, deep scratches in the metal, fresh ones, the kind that looked like they'd been made by something dragging its fingers across the surface while keeping up at highway speed. He never found out what was in that car on the shoulder. He never found out what followed him. He filed the scratches under "I don't want to know" and hasn't driven that stretch of I-80 at night since. Story 2. She was already inside. This one was posted by a user called Temperance R, a woman in her mid-20s at the time of the incident. She was driving home from college, a 12-hour trip through Missouri and into Illinois, and she made a stop at a rest area somewhere on I-70 around 11:30 at night. She said she almost didn't stop. She'd been driving for 6 hours straight and really just needed to use the restroom and splash some water on her face. Her eyes were starting to do that thing where the road lines blur together, and she knew pushing through wasn't smart. So when the blue rest area sign came up in her headlights, she flicked on her turn signal and pulled off.
The rest area was one of those older concrete block ones, the kind that looks like it was built in the 1970s and hasn't been meaningfully updated since. A few fluorescent lights mounted high on the exterior walls. A vending machine humming against the side of the building with that constant low mechanical drone. Separate restroom buildings on either side of a covered walkway with a couple of wooden picnic tables between them that nobody was using. The parking lot had two other cars in it, both empty as far as she could tell. One was a blue pickup truck parked close to the entrance, and the other was a sedan pulled all the way to the far end of the lot, almost in the grass. She parked somewhere in the middle, cut her engine, and sat for a second. She said the silence hit her right away. She'd been on the highway for hours with the radio going and the road noise filling up the car, and stepping out into that parking lot felt like stepping into a vacuum. The kind of quiet that isn't really quiet. It's full of small sounds that your brain usually filters out. Crickets, wind moving through the grass beyond the lot, the buzz of the fluorescent lights overhead. But no voices, no other people visible anywhere. She told herself that was fine. It was almost midnight on a Tuesday. Of course it was empty. She grabbed her phone and her keys, locked the car, and walked quickly toward the women's restroom. The door was one of those heavy institutional ones without a lock, just a push entry, no latch. She pushed through it and stepped inside. The lights inside were flickering in that slow, lazy way that fluorescent bulbs do when they're about to give out. Not fully off, but not fully on either. Just this pulsing yellowish half-light that made everything look slightly wrong. The tiles on the floor were old and cracked in places, the grout dark with age. The sinks along the left wall had those push-button faucets that only run for about 4 seconds before cutting off. There were 3 stalls along the right wall. All 3 doors were standing open. She checked them, glanced under each one out of habit, the way women do when they're alone in a public restroom late at night, and all 3 were empty. She went into the middle stall, latched the door, and that's when she noticed how loud the silence was in there. The flickering light made a faint electrical ticking sound. The ventilation system somewhere in the ceiling made a low rattle, but otherwise, nothing. She did her business, reached for the toilet paper, and that's when she heard it. Breathing. Not from the stall next to her, not from somewhere across the room, from directly above her. Slow, steady, rhythmic breathing, like someone in a deep, relaxed sleep. The kind of breathing that has a weight to it, a presence, the kind you can feel as much as hear. Her hand froze on the toilet paper roll. She stayed completely still for what she says felt like a full minute, but was probably about 5 seconds. She told herself it was the ventilation, the building settling, her own breathing echoing off the tiles in a weird way. Then she looked up. There was a woman sitting on top of the stall divider, up near the ceiling, legs tucked underneath her, arms wrapped loosely around her knees, just perched up there, like it was the most natural thing in the world, watching her, smiling. The woman was pale, not sickly pale, just naturally very, very fair, almost colorless in the flickering light. Her hair was long and tangled, hanging forward over her shoulders in thick, matted sections like it hadn't been brushed or washed in weeks. Her feet were bare. Temperance noticed the feet specifically, she said. They were dirty on the soles but not cut up, which somehow made it stranger, like she was used to being barefoot on rough surfaces. And she was just staring down with this wide, completely still smile, not blinking, not shifting her weight, not reacting to Temperance's gaze at all, just smiling. The way a person smiles in a photograph, frozen, rehearsed, pointed at nothing in particular. Temperance said she didn't scream. She said later she thinks her brain just went completely offline for a second, like a computer trying to process something it simply wasn't built to handle. So her body stood up on its own, unlatched the stall door on pure muscle memory, and walked out of the restroom at a pace she can only describe as controlled panic. Her legs were moving fast, but her mind was still catching up, still buffering, still trying to decide if what she saw was real. She didn't run until she hit the outside air, then she ran. She crossed the parking lot at full sprint, got to her car, got inside, locked every door, and sat there shaking for about 30 seconds before she started the engine and pulled out. She didn't look back at the restroom building. She didn't look at the other cars in the lot. She just drove back up the on-ramp and got on I-70 heading east, and she did not slow down for a long time. She didn't stop again for 3 hours. She made it to a well-lit gas station outside of a larger town, pulled up under the canopy lights, and sat in her car until her hands stopped shaking enough to pump gas. She posted about it on Reddit mostly because she wanted to know if anyone else had seen something like that, a person in a place they shouldn't be, too still, too quiet, watching. A few people responded. 2 of them said they'd had similar experiences at rest stops, not the same rest stop, not even the same state, just the general thing, a person in a place they shouldn't be, too still, too quiet, watching. One of them, and this is the part that stuck with her, described a woman matching almost the exact same description. Same long, tangled hair, same pale, almost colorless skin, same bare feet. Different rest area, different state, different year, same smile. Temperance replied asking for more details. The user who'd responded sent her a private message with a few more specifics, the highway, the general region, and the time of year. Then they said one more thing before the conversation went cold. They said the woman on the stall hadn't just been sitting there quietly. She'd been counting, quietly under her breath, numbers going up, like she was keeping track of something. They never figured out what, and nobody who's posted about her ever has.
Story 3, Mile Marker 404. This story comes from a user named Greer_writes, a guy in his early 30s who, at the time, was doing freelance photography and regularly drove long stretches of highway to get to shoot locations in rural areas. He posted this story in a thread about paranormal highway experiences, but he was very careful to say he does not believe in the paranormal. He believes there is an explanation for what happened, he just doesn't have it. This took place on a 2-lane state highway in Kansas. He doesn't name the specific road, but says it runs roughly north to south through the western part of the state. He was heading back from a weekend shoot, driving alone around 1 in the morning. The road was straight, perfectly, almost unnaturally straight. Just flat farmland on both sides, darkness beyond the reach of his headlights, and absolute silence except for the sound of the engine. He said driving that road at night felt less like driving and more like being stationary while the world scrolled past on a loop. Same flat fields, same black sky, same white dashes ticking under the car, over and over and over. He had the radio on low, some AM station out of Wichita that kept cutting in and out, and his camera bag was on the passenger seat. Good weekend, productive shoot. He was tired but comfortable. The kind of tired that makes long drives almost meditative if the road is empty enough. He noticed the mile markers as he drove because there was literally nothing else to look at. 401, 402, 403, then nothing. He drove what felt like several minutes, longer than it should have taken to cover a single mile, before he saw 405. He actually turned around and drove back to check. Sure enough, 401, 402, 403, then a gap of empty road, then 405. No marker 404. He figured it had just been knocked down or vandalized, not that unusual. But then he noticed something else. On the stretch of road between 403 and 405, the asphalt was different, newer, much newer. You could see the difference in color clearly under his headlights. A roughly quarter-mile section that had clearly been repaved at some point more recently than the rest of the road. The older asphalt on either side was that familiar sun-bleached gray, cracked and weathered from years of Kansas heat and freeze cycles. The section in the middle was darker, almost charcoal, with clean, unbroken edges where it met the old road. He slowed down and looked out the windows. On either side of the road, at the edge of the gravel shoulder, there were what looked like tire tracks leading off into the field, several sets of them. Old ones, the grass had grown back around them somewhat, so they hadn't been made recently, but they were deep, like vehicles had driven through at speed and not stopped for a long time, not like someone had gently pulled off the road, like something had left the road without choosing to. He put the car in park right there on the shoulder and sat for a moment. He's a photographer. He notices things. Composition, detail, the story a frame is trying to tell. And the story this stretch of road was telling him felt incomplete in a way that nagged at him. He grabbed his camera and got out. He took 4 shots total. One wide frame of the road showing the contrast between the old and new asphalt, one close shot of the patched edge where the 2 surfaces met, 2 shots of the tire tracks in the field,
one from each side of the road. He said through the viewfinder everything looked exactly as it did to the naked eye. Nothing unusual in the frame. He checked the shots on the camera's screen before getting back in the car. They were there, clear, well exposed, exactly what he'd intended. He got back in the car and kept driving. When he got home, he searched online for any accidents or incidents on that stretch of highway. He found one news article from a local paper dated about 4 years earlier. It was brief, 3 sentences. It said that a multi-vehicle accident had occurred on the highway, that several people had been injured, and that the road had been temporarily closed for cleanup and repaving. 3 sentences. No names, no details about how many vehicles, no cause, no follow-up. The kind of article that reads less like journalism and more like someone was legally required to acknowledge that something had happened. He emailed the local paper asking for more details. The reply he got was from an editor who told him the original reporter had left the paper and the archived version of the full article had been lost in a website migration. He tried other angles. He searched the county sheriff's department's public incident logs for that year. Nothing matching that road, that date range. He searched for obituaries from that area in the weeks following the date on the article. He found 3, but all 3 listed causes of death unrelated to a vehicle accident, and none of them mentioned the highway. It was like the accident had been quietly smoothed over, filed away in some drawer that nobody was meant to open. He went back to that highway 2 weeks later in the daytime to take another look. He wanted the light. He wanted to see what he might have missed at 1 in the morning. The fresh asphalt was still there. The tire tracks in the field on both sides were still there. In the daylight, he could see them more clearly, and there were more of them than he'd realized. At least 5 or 6 distinct sets on the east side alone, fanning out into the field at slightly different angles, like multiple vehicles had gone off the road at the same point, but traveled in slightly different directions once they left the pavement. He took more pictures, a full card's worth this time. But the pictures he'd taken that night, the 4 shots he'd watched himself take, checked on the screen and confirmed were gone from his camera's memory card. Completely. Not corrupted, not moved to a different folder, simply absent. Every other photo from that entire weekend was present and accounted for. Those 4 were not. He posted the daytime photos on Reddit with his story. Clear, well-lit images of the road, the patched asphalt, the tire tracks, the new fence posts. 2 days later, those posts were gone too. Not deleted by a moderator, his entire account was suspended for what Reddit's automated system flagged as targeted harassment of a private individual. He had tagged no one, named no one by name, mentioned no town by name. He made a new account just to post a final update. It said only this: "Someone knows what happened at mile marker 404. I don't think they're online, but I think they know I was looking. I'm done looking." The post got 3 comments before that account was suspended too. He hasn't posted about it since.
Story 4. The Man in the Median. The last story tonight comes from a user called Delford_J, a former highway patrol officer from Ohio who spent 6 years working overnight shifts on the interstate. He posted this in a thread specifically asking law enforcement about the strangest things they'd encountered on the job. He said in 6 years he'd seen a lot. Accidents, drunk drivers, people in mental health crises wandering on the shoulder, one time a horse on the highway. He said very little surprised him anymore by his 3rd year. But this happened in his 5th year, and he has never fully made peace with it. It was February, around 3 in the morning. He was parked in a median turnaround on I-71 running radar when he saw someone standing in the median about 200 yards ahead of him. Just standing there, in the snow, in the dark, in the median of an interstate highway. He turned on his lights and pulled forward slowly. The figure didn't move, didn't flinch at the lights, just stood there. As he got closer, he could see it was a man, tall, very tall, maybe 6'5" or 6'6". He was wearing a heavy coat and dark pants, and he was just standing perfectly still, facing the northbound lanes with his back to the southbound side where Delford was approaching from. Delford pulled up behind him and got out of the cruiser. He called out, "Sir, you need to step away from the roadway." The man turned around slowly.
Delford said he looked about 60 years old. Gray stubble, weathered face, completely calm, not distressed, not drunk, not confused, just calm. His eyes were wide open, but somehow flat, like the lights weren't on behind them. "Are you all right?" Delford asked. The man said, and Delford remembers this word for word, "He already went past." Delford asked him who. The man didn't answer, he just looked back at the northbound lanes. Delford called it in and asked for a welfare unit. He stood with the man, tried to ask him questions, where he lived, if he had a car, if he was hurt. The man didn't respond to anything else, just stood there, staring at the road. The backup unit arrived about 12 minutes later. In those 12 minutes, Delford said, not a single car passed in either direction, on an interstate, at 3 in the morning. That in itself wasn't impossible, but it felt wrong, like the road had just held its breath. When the second officer arrived, Delford turned to look at the man. He was gone. Both officers searched the median and the immediate shoulder. Nothing. The snow was undisturbed except for the footprints they themselves had made. No tracks leading away, no indication which direction the man had gone. They ran the description and found nothing matching in missing persons, no calls about a man fitting that description anywhere in the county that night. Delford quit the force about a year later. He says it wasn't because of that incident specifically, but when people ask him why he left, he gets quiet for a second before he answers. And he always answers the same way. "I stopped trusting what I saw out there." 4 people, 4 highways, 4 experiences that don't have clean explanations. If you've driven through the Midwest at night, you know what that darkness feels like. How quickly everything outside the reach of your headlights just ceases to exist. How easy it is to feel completely and utterly alone. And how much worse it feels when you realize that maybe you're not. Drive safe tonight. And if you see something in your rearview mirror that you can't explain, don't stop.